Hey everyone, this is Gleb Akhmutov again with a TanStack router example. In the previous video, we stopped the initial loading call at the network level, and we confirmed that the application is showing the right number of employees. We used intercept, we waited for the network call, everything is great. In a sense, our test is drawing the boundary of app at the network layer. When the application is making the get API employees request, that's where we can stop. On the other hand, if you look at how our employees is using the API, it's pretty much the front-end code versus this layer of API calls. So we're using employee API object that comes from a separate file. This interface is probably pretty stable. We expect the front-end code to say employees API.get and then get the list of employees, and everything under it are details. So we can draw the boundary in our test at the employee API object level. So imagine that we would stop this call instead of a network API call. And the way we do it is by reaching and overriding this get method. So the way to expose that object and its get method is in the source code. And we can expose it only if window Cypress is defined. And we can say something like employee API and employees API. And because the window doesn't have it, usually we can just ignore it for the next line. All right, so if we're running inside the Cypress test, then this window in this application now has employees API object. And this is the real get that the application uses. So we can say get, and it will return a promise. And notice Cypress actually intercepts it again and returns the same 11 employees again. But now we want to intercept this at the method level. And the way we do this in our Cypress test is like this. So I'm going to copy the test because it's going to look very much the same. So we can say it loads the list of employees using, let's say, employees API. Okay. So instead of intercept, we have to play a trick. We have to, when we visit the page, before the application loads any code, we have to say, okay, you will get a property set, and that will be the real object. And we're going to wait for that set to happen, this assignment to the property happen. And we can do this by saying object define property window employees API, and it will get a set method. So we'll say value. So right now there is no employees API, that's a value being assigned. So when you get this value, if you have to use it, just return the local variable. But when you set, all right, and x is whatever the real object is, this is this part, the right hand part of this assignment to this property, then, well, first of all, you can keep it, but also now you can stop its get method, which is this method that returns actual data, that makes the fetch API call. So we can use size stub by method name, and we can say, okay, that's the alias, and instead of returns, because it's asynchronous, we'll say resolves, and we give it the list of employees just like before. Okay, so this will happen during the visit. The application will make the call. It will try to set the employee APIs before it and will be ready with a stub. So it will call our stub. So here, instead of waiting for the network call, we'll say get that alias stub, and it should have been called once. Okay, let's see how it goes. Okay, so instead of a network table, we now have a stub method table, and the alias get employees was really called once because our front-end code called the API object get method, and we can see it was called really. And if you inspect the call, notice there is an argument with lots of options. This is what TanStack router does, right? That's how it calls the loader. So you can use all these things if you want to in your code. But we're not using anything, we're just resolving with a list of employees, which our front end shows. So these are two different examples, one of stubbing the data load at the network level, and one stubbing that method at the API level in the source code, because our front end is pretty separate from the API, so we should be able to write end-to-end test that controls either network or the API call in our front-end code.